This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Spring Creek Model Trains. Family owned for nearly 25 years, Spring Creek is your destination for model trains. Check out springcreekmodeltrains.com for a wide variety of offerings from today's top manufacturers and exclusive products found nowhere else. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, or at a train show near you, stop in and say wow. To see where they'll be next, visit their website at springcreekmodeltrains.com. If you're looking to bring more realism to your layout industries, look no further than tullymodels.com, the home of Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply and Steel Mill Modeler Supply. With models to fit steam, transition, and diesel eras, Kevin Tully has you covered with all of the components you'll need to take your grain and steel mills to the next level. Check out the entire catalog at tullymodels.com. It's time for you to submit your answer for the question of the month, our new feature where you get to be heard on Around the Layout. Our question this month: what is the ideal length of an operating session and why? Go to aroundthelayout.com/question to give us your answer. Answers must be received by February 15th. So again, aroundthelayout.com/question. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. It's time once again for Talking Ops with Don Irace, and it just wouldn't be the right title to the show without the man himself, Don Irace. Don, welcome back.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back.
Good to see you again. We've been chatting quite a bit lately because we're recording this now. So by the time this airs, I've already come back and had a great time, but we'll preemptively, I'm heading down to see you in just a couple days. So you got that layout ready to go for me?
It is all ready to go. I've been working on it all day, 2 days ago.
Nice. Yeah. All day, 2 days ago.
Yep.
We'll get everybody confused about what day it is. I didn't even know what day it was when we started talking pre-show. So I don't know. It ends in a Y. So I think I'm kind of, that puts me in the ballpark. So
we got it all. Yeah, we spent the day cleaning track, cleaning engines, getting everything all cleaned up and everything. So we're all ready to go. I usually do all that before I have an op session anyway, because I'm like a fanatic with that.
Well, it's all part of the process, and kind of leading into that kind of part of the process and talking about ops. We're going to be talking about some big ops today. We're going to bring back a guest we've had on before, who owns a beautiful layout, the BNSF Fall River Division, Mr. John Parker. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Ray. It's great to be here with you and Don.
Good evening, John.
It's been a while since we've had you on the show. We were just looking back at that. You were back on episode 68. We were introduced to you in the BNSF Fall River Division, a outstanding layout that I know the two guys here on the screen need to get out to Longmont, Colorado and see.
You sure do, yes. You have an open invitation anytime.
Oh, awesome.
We've been treated to a lot of coverage on the BNSF Fall River Division. I still go back to the video that our good buddy John Abaticola did for TSG Multimedia, which is an outstanding look at your layout, but nothing beats being there. And boy, I just, we'll have to get away from that cold weather. Maybe sometime in the spring or fall, we'll get ourselves out to Colorado and check it out.
Yeah, just let me know. We're always having a session and always open to having guests. So you're welcome anytime.
Looking forward to it.
Look forward to a trip to Colorado. But in the interim, we're going to get to find out a bit more about ops on the BNSF Fall River Division, because you're one of the guys that we got to the end of the podcast and an hour clicks right on by and you went, hey, what about ops? How about the operations of my layout? So we had to bring you back. We only had to wait, I don't know, about double the amount of episodes to get you back, but we got you back here, and we're excited to learn more about how you operate the BNSF Fall River Division, the challenges that you have with such a big layout, including crewing that operation session and all the things that you do to prepare for it. And of course, what the railroad does while you're operating it. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
When I think about, just the challenge that you must have. We're just talking a little bit about Don getting his layout ready. Talk about some of the prep you do for getting your layout ready, because I'm sure there's quite a bit to it.
That's a very frequent question I get is, how much time do you spend prepping the layout for an operating session? And generally, it's only about maybe 2.5, 3 hours. Fortunately, the design of the layout allows the trains to go back into staging, so they're in the right position for the next session. So there's not a lot of restaging, basically no restaging that has to be done. I do check the cars to make sure that the previous session was, there was no mistakes or no missed spots. So that takes a little bit of time. I generally clean the track. Some of the hot spots, I have a few hot spots, I call them, that for whatever reason, the track always seems to get dirty on a curve or two or three. So it takes a little bit of time to clean some track. Vacuum the floor occasionally. And a lot of time does go into, as you mentioned, preparing and finding the crew, managing the whole invitation process, and keeping track of that. So I do turn the computers on, get the dispatcher CTC machine up, and GMRI operations. That takes a few minutes, but it's not a whole lot of time, surprisingly, for a large layout. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the design. So it was designed for operations. So
what do you use to clean your track with?
I use mineral spirits.
Do you have a system, or you do it by hand? Do you drag track cleaning cars around?
No, I just have mineral spirits. I put it on a lint-free rag and wipe it with my fingertip. And it takes maybe 10, 15 minutes to hit those hot spots before a session. And that's about it.
All right. So you don't have any track cleaning train, then you can send around the whole layout and just let it do its thing.
No, I just haven't had a need for that. The environment, the layout, I've got carpet, so I don't get a lot of concrete dust, and I've got a finished ceiling, so I don't get any dust coming down onto the layout. I have a air purification system. I have a great, furnace and air filtration system, so it's never really an issue, surprisingly.
And I bet you don't cut humaso or masonite or anything else down in that room like some fools that I'm pointing to myself do around their layout.
Yeah, that was all done outside.
Disaster, yeah.
I just did all that and putting the toggle switches in for my turnouts. I got rid of those push-pull things. I had my father on the vacuum cleaner and me on the drill. I'm like, make sure you catch all that dust. I says,
masonite
going around.
Yeah, makes a mess. It's for sure.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got another question. Why do they call it odorless mineral spirits when you can smell the stuff? And maybe you don't have the answer to that, but
I don't. That's a good question. I hear it all the time.
Well, it's funny that so many people have different methods, and you talk about odorless mineral spirits, and we've heard so many. It's almost like the big debate, right? How to clean track, and there's about 100 different approaches. What led you to using mineral spirits for it?
Well, initially I was using isopropyl alcohol, 70%. And after cleaning it, it was drying, and I was getting a lot of micro arcing from having it so dry. So mineral spirits leaves a little bit of residue on the track, on the railhead, and that really doesn't affect the the adhesion, the pulling power of the locomotives. I don't get any slippage or anything like that. So that, and I think Joe Fugate did some research on it, and there's a whole story out there about. I'm not sure of the science behind it, but there are a lot of products that are just better for cleaning tracks liquid than some of the drier products like IP. So, and it's been very effective. I've definitely noticed less cleaning between sessions and less dirt and gunk on the rail. I can only attribute it to switching over to mineral spirits.
I got to try that because I use the 70%. Alcohol, and I've always used it for years, and it was always worked for me. I have mineral spirits, but I just never attempted to try it. I know guys that use a lot of clubs use a wall clipper oil to keep the arcing down.
Right.
But to me, it's oil, and it's just, if you don't have any grades, or helix or anything like that, then that's all well and good. But you start getting at the stiff grades and helixes, you might have a problem with wall clipper oil.
Yeah. There's another product out there called NOOX Special A that was discussed, and that was too much lubrication on top of the rail, and I had an issue with that, so I cleaned all that off, back to mineral spirits. But I had to try it, so
I got some if you want it.
I've got some too that I don't need.
Well, I think with the NOOX, right, you're supposed to apply it, then remove it, right, like take it back off. Well, see, my problem is, and I'm admittedly one of those people that only reads half the instructions. Right. So I saw put on rail. I never read the part that says take off. So I had it on there, and then of course, then I'm like, man, my track's dirtier than it was before. And then, I think it was actually Mark Herrick that I had mentioned it to. He goes, yeah, you're supposed to take it back off. I was like, oh, well, that explains a lot. So that was a mess trying to clean it all back off there again. And then I've kind of moved to mineral spirits and the good old Scotty's Model Shop. Now it's an ISE product, the track cleaner that they have. I apologize for not knowing the name off the top of my head, but if you know it, you know it, and just look it up at Iowa Scaled Engineering. They got a great track cleaning tool to use that uses a microfiber cloth that attaches to it. Okay. So I use that for interim. But I imagine with as much railroad as you have, prevention is really the big part of the cure there.
That's right. Yeah, the carpet protecting the dust from the concrete coming up. I've also sealed, before I put carpet down, I actually sealed the concrete, and then I put carpet on top, and then I also have sealing, protecting the dust coming down from the joists and flooring. So it's been very beneficial. I've had no tractive effort issues with mineral spirits, and it just seems to work great. So I'm very happy with it.
Now you got me thinking.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to try some after this next op session, then try to run my train up the helix to see what happens. Because that's really what's going to be yay and nay for me for that,
Right.
I understand. I mean, I don't have a lot of, like I said, I got the same thing. My floor's covered, my ceiling's covered, everything's covered, and I have, my air conditioning doesn't pick up any dust at all. I keep cleaning it. There's nothing in it, so I don't have much dust.
Yeah, like you said, that prevention stuff of even doing the things beforehand, like closing ceilings in and covering floors and eliminating all those dust sources certainly seems to help. I mean, even with me, with down in my basement, open rafters, I know the dust. Every time somebody walks upstairs, it's just another shake of dust over the top of my layout. Boy, I wish I could go back and eventually I will. And I think that's the right way to do it, is to slow down and kind of finish the room, right? And get that thing ready for a layout, especially if you're planning on doing opses and tenses you both are doing.
Well, let's move along, John, on what you're doing over there. I'm stuck on track cleaning all night long. Yeah. So just so how do you call your crews? Do you do emails? You send text messages? What's the situation with that?
Yeah. So I've got about 85, 90, maybe even 100 people in my system, right? And I take my magic number is about 20 operators for each session. So I pick and choose, cherry pick the operators that the invitation goes out to. So, but it's a mix of those 20 people. It's a blend of regular operating crew, and I typically hold 2 or 3 slots for visitors or guests every session, because I've also got a waiting list for people that have sent me, emails, say, I'd like to participate in a session, and I'm certainly supportive of that. So I typically hold at least 2 slots every session for guests to come or new operators to come and operate. So a lot of times there are people from Colorado Front Range, or there are people from out of town, or what have you. So typically it's a blend. There are about 5 people that have helped with the layout construction, and they've literally put in blood, sweat, and tears into the layout. So they get an invite for every session.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's also a few fellow hosts in the Front Range that I attend their sessions, so they get an invitation more frequently. And then the other regular operators are pretty much on a rotation system. So I like to give everybody an equal chance to operate. So there's a rotation. And sure enough, every month I get an email or 2 or 3. Hey, how come I didn't get invited for the session? And I have to explain that, well, we try to rotate everybody to give everybody an equal chance to come and operate. So that's generally the makeup of the crew. And typically what I do about 3 weeks before the session, I operate every second Saturday, and I'm always consistent with that. So people know when to expect an invitation. My wife knows what's going on, so she can get out of the house. And so I'm pretty consistent with operating on the second Saturday of every month. But I'll send an email out to about 20 people, maybe 22 people, because I know I'll generally get about 5% that'll, have other plans and they just can't make it. And I certainly understand that. So I get a pretty good response back. And if I need to invite 1 or 2 more to get to that 20 mark, I'll just reach into the list and pull somebody else out of the rotation and send them an email. And it's never a problem. always have at least 19, 20 people coming to the session.
Do you ever have a time where your session's going to happen the next day and all of a sudden you get a couple of guys that call you and say, oh, something changed, I can't make it? Do you have a backup list to go to fill in those 2 spots?
Generally, no. I do tell people that, hey, if you're not feeling well, you have cough or cold-like symptoms, don't come. And we had that happen occasionally, but otherwise, nobody's called off at the last minute other than being sick or ill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even so, the operating scheme, I can adjust plus or minus 3 or 4 operators. So if somebody or 2 or 3 people call out at the last minute for whatever reason, and I can't get somebody to fill in, we can certainly still have a great session with 18 people instead of 20, or we can just make adjustments easily by knowing a train or 2 or not running as many extras over the road or whatever. So that's kind of built into the plan.
So what's your bare minimum?
I could probably do 15 or 16.
Okay.
15.
Yeah, that's good.
And within that group, what are you doing? Are you operating or are you playing superintendent?
I operate. I'm a firm believer that the host should be, the owner should be operating every session.
Absolutely.
So I do that. And if I have to get called away or, I can certainly do that. But I think it's important that the owners operate all the positions to understand, because we have a vision of how it should run. And until you actually do it, and even though I ask operators all the time for feedback, a lot of times I'll take a position and, hey, this isn't working like it should, or there's a problem. Why wasn't that reported to me? And I find that when I'm actually operating on that particular position. So it's really important, I think, that the hosts or the owners operate as much as possible.
I totally agree with that. Totally. So I built this layout for me to have fun too.
Yeah,
I didn't build it for everybody else to come over here and run. I want to be involved in it too, just as much as they do. So I always do something. And like I say, I've done every job on this layout 100 times already.
Good.
So, but I got to be a part of it. I just can't not sit back and do nothing.
Yeah, that's the way it should be, in my opinion. Yeah. So,
I know too many people have done that. They walk around scuffing their feet, looking at you. What are you doing that way for?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you go grab a throttle and go run your own train and leave me alone?
And there's lots of ways to get a job done. So,
yeah, exactly. No 2 guys do the same job the same way, even in a prototype. Right. Every crew does something their own way.
Yeah.
So I don't tell the guys how to do it or what to do. It's your job. I want this done. You do it whatever way you feel necessary.
Exactly. That's a key point I always make. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to tell you what to do. And that's part of the fun, is figuring out how to do it.
Right,
so
exactly.
Here's your objectives or your job responsibilities, if you will, and you go figure it out. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Is there a job on your layout you won't take, John, that because you want to have that freedom to break away, or is it all kind of just all in play?
No, I've still done it. I've dispatched. I've taken every job several times, even though it might be tough to break away. My opinion is that if we have enough experience and skill, this layout should run by itself, basically. And sure, problems come up occasionally, but that's a whole nother topic, how we handle issues and problems that come up. But so I'm not afraid to take a job that's going to tie me up for the entire session, because generally it runs pretty well and we don't have very many issues. And we have a good experienced crew that don't need their hands held.
So you're not the kind of owner that'll break the soldering iron out in the middle of an op session. So I'll fix this stuff. No.
I don't think I've ever done that. No.
How many times I've seen that happen?
So you talked about experienced guys, but you also leave some slots open for new folks. Talk about getting new folks acquainted to your layout. Because for those that don't know, and again, I encourage you to go back and listen to John's episode aroundthelayout.com/68. It's a very big layout. And for a new person, how do you get them accustomed to the Fall River Division?
Well, generally, there's a couple things. First, my priority is to make sure that new operators feel as comfortable as possible. I've had years ago, when I first started operating, this was 20 years ago on another layout, I've had a few bad experiences where I'd stick somebody in a job and they had a terrible time. They were overwhelmed and didn't want to come back. So I've learned from that. And my primary job is to make new operators as comfortable as possible. So a couple things I do. First is I send them a link to my webpage that has a tab with all the operating documentation. It's got your job descriptions, very much detail, so they can review it, the layout plans on there, and they can do some homework before they come over if they want. I also talk to them before the session and ask, how comfortable do you feel? Because generally, new operators or guests are going to have a wide range of experience. Some people can just jump right in and run a yard. Some people are intimidated just by running on the main line across the layout. So I always ask them how comfortable you feel. Are you comfortable with going solo? Do you need a pilot? Do you want to work with somebody? And they generally tell me their comfort level and what they'd like to do. So if I need to team them up with somebody more experienced, I'll do that. If they want to go out on their own because they think they can handle the yard or an over-the-road job or switching, we'll put them in one of those jobs. So it's important to understand where they're coming from and help accommodate, their level of experience or not. So that works out really well. And so I do that before the session, one-on-one. So we're not talking about that in front of the other 18 or 19, 20 operators.
Right. Yep.
And it's worked out well. And I always team, if they want to be teamed up with somebody, when we go through and select the jobs, I'll just write their name down. Who would be a good person to help them, be a pilot or to help train them? I'll write that on the list so they don't even have to choose. And I assign them to somebody that's good at getting new people acquainted to the layout.
That's smart. Now, you were talking about if you have a problem, don't you have enough of your regular operators there that could get off their train and go fix that problem without you having to do it yourself?
Yes, sometimes, depending on what the issue is. If it's something that's going to hold a session up, by all means, I'll have to jump in. For example, last year we had the entire layout shut down.
Oof, that's not good.
And
hey, when that happens,
I don't know what happened, but so I'm checking, and I spent 10 or 15 minutes, and I found out that one of the operators that had a Wi-Fi throttle hit the emergency button on their throttle and shut the whole layout down. So, and it took me, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to figure that out because the operator hit the button and thought he was just stopping his train and didn't say anything. So instead of having this throttle program to stop just his train, it shut the whole layout down. So something like that I had to get involved in.
What system do you run?
Digitrax, but we do have Wi-Fi. So a lot of the operators have their own throttles. They'll bring the TCS throttles over or the ESU throttles, Wi-Fi throttles.
Yep.
So there's a couple of people that have, actually there's like 8 or 9 people now that have their own throttles. They bring them with them.
On NCE, you got to push the red button 3 times to shut the system down.
Yeah.
So it kind of saves a lot of that.
And all the throttles are different. So for example, with the TCS, you can program it to stop just your train or shut the entire layout down. ESU, it just shuts the whole layout down. Oh. So, so you got to be very careful as the owner of the throttle that you've got it programmed properly and you know how to use it. Otherwise, you could affect the entire session. That's what happened early last year. So we learned our lesson the hard way by shutting the layout down for 10 minutes during a session. But something like that, I need to get engaged in and fix. Most of the other issues, if there's a derailment or an issue, the operator can handle that themselves.
I've been responsible for shutting a layout down with 3 or 4 people, derailing something and shorting something out. But
right,
never have I been the one responsible when I got 20 people staring at me saying, "What'd you do?" So, that seems like a lot of pressure. You definitely don't want to be the one messing that up.
Right. Yeah, we still talk about that in our pre-session briefing. If you've got your own throttle, check it to make sure it's programmed properly to only stop your train and not shut the whole layout down. So that's important. Yeah.
So now when they come in, you give them like aprons and you give them, you got car cards, switch lists. I mean, you set them up with the radio. You got a lot of guys that have a hard time talking on the radio too.
No, that's another thing that we talk about a lot. So the operators are responsible to, if they want an apron, the radios, I bought radios so that we're not trying to figure out how to use 10 different brands of radios and turn the beeps and whistles off. And so I've got them all preset. I've got 12 radios for the road crews. The other jobs have a phone intercom system. So that really helped by turning off the private squelch that creates a delay, by turning off all the beeps and Vox and all that kind of stuff. So I have 12 radios that I've had. We use those instead of everybody having to figure out their own radio or figure out get somebody else's radio or something like that. That solved a lot of problems. But they're really responsible to bring their own, if you want to use your own pick, your own apron, like people are bringing their own Wi-Fi throttles now, because it's really what you're comfortable using and operating. So a lot of these operators are pretty experienced and they've got their own thing going on to help them operate. I always tell them that Real railroaders have a grip, and in that grip, they carry a flashlight and all those tools that they need. I carry a grip when I go to somebody else's layout. It's got all my essentials in there, and they should have a grip too, so that they have the tools and the equipment that they need to operate.
Right.
So
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that helps a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine, my bag right now that's got dust piling on it. So we got to get back to operating up here in the Northeast because my bag hasn't been touched in a while with all those tools in it. But so talk about your pre-ops briefing and some of those things that you're covering. You talked a little bit about the tools, you talked a little bit about that, but talk about your pre-ops briefing. What does that sound like?
When I send out the invitation, the doors open at 15 minutes before the top of the hour. And then at the top of the hour, we start the session. That way people can come in, especially new people, and check out the layout, see what's new. And then we actually have the crew briefing at the top of the hour. And the first thing I do is I thank everybody that brings goodies. A lot of people bring munchies and drinks. And that's the very first thing that I do is say, thank you for coming. And I introduce the guests, people that are new. And then I thank those folks that brought goodies for everybody to use in the crew lounge. And then I talk about things that are new on the layout, maybe new construction, new procedures. I always have a reminder to use main one if you're going to drop cars off at Kimbers. Dispatcher knows what track to put you on and as the crew you need to go. And so I always have a reminder or two that we need just to talk about. Could be remember to put the derails back on when you're done using them. A variety of things. It's usually something new every month that I have to remind people about. We talk about new things, and then we do a safety briefing. It takes a few minutes. We talk about 4 key points, how to evacuate in case there's an emergency in the basement. Safety, we talk about what to do if the power goes out. We have the emergency lighting, where the first aid kits are, where the fire extinguishers are. Assembly point, we need to count heads if we're evacuated. Watch your step, because there's a lot of people in the basement, and we do have some raised floors that have steps. So we talk about safety for a few minutes, and then we do the crew call. We start the crew call. First thing I do is announce people that are there that can't take the job. My rule is that you can only take a job 2 consecutive times in a row, 2 consecutive times.
Yep.
And that allows somebody else to have the job. And over time, that increases the skill base across all the crew members for all the jobs, I think. If somebody's always working the yard, nobody else is going to have a chance to do that, and we lose overall skill in the yard. So I announce who can't take what particular jobs, and I have a software application that tracks all that. So after every session, I put the person's name in the database, what job they had, and that way, when I get the report for the crew call at the briefing to assign jobs, I know who can't take what job. And there's a seniority system that we use. I have an application that actually tracks everybody's history and all the jobs that they've had ever since we started operating 15 years ago. So the seniority system tracks everybody's seniority points. Everybody earns a point when they take a job. Those jobs that don't turn a wheel, like a dispatcher or traffic, there's 2 people that work in the traffic center. It's active staging, and the yard master earn double points. So that goes into the database. When you give a safety briefing, because I don't give the safety briefing, I have somebody from the crew, a different person from the crew do it. And they earn a half a seniority point. That's how they remember, and people like to listen when somebody else is doing it. So that helps. So we have this seniority system, and I generate a report, and it kicks out from top down who's got the most seniority, and then we go top down to select jobs. So in the briefing, if Ray's on top and you're number 1, you get to select the first of 20 jobs that you want. And however, there's some randomness built into that. So just because you've got the most points doesn't mean you're always going to be on top. And vice versa, if you have the least amount of points, you're not going to always be on the bottom. There's some randomness built into that. So that's how we select jobs based on seniority, just like the real railroaders love seniority, right? There's benefits to having seniority, and the same applies here. So those guys that help build the layout, the people that come over and help during open houses, help guests during visiting operating groups that come over, they earn a seniority point or 2 for each time they help out. And the more effort and more work you put into the layout, my layout, Fall River Division, the more seniority you're going to earn. And you could use that to pick jobs. So that's a real benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the seniority. So generally we pick top down when we pick jobs or assignments. I do that about 80% of the time. I also do what's called a bottoms up about 10% of the time, so that those people that are always towards the end with the fewest seniority points get first pick. So we'll turn it upside down and mix it up a little bit. So that helps. I also do something. I do a complete random. We'll put your name in a hat and pull it out, and wherever it falls, you get to pick a job based on when your name is pulled.
That's cool.
And occasionally, we've put the jobs in a hat and had people pull the jobs out, and then I give them like 5 minutes to trade with each other. So if you're not comfortable dispatching, you don't want to dispatch and you want to do something else, you can trade with whoever, and it's a big negotiation. That's kind of fun to do.
Yeah, it sounds like a drawing with a Yankee swap at the end of
Yeah,
it.
Yankee swap.
right.
I was going to say that. What do you do for your dispatches? How do you generally keep the same dispatches on? How do you get to the point where you can dispatch the layout?
You earn seniority points. So there are guys and gals, operators that love to dispatch, and it becomes a contest to see who gets picked first to dispatch. And
so you guys got guys calling you up wanting to come over and clean your house every week so they can get points to come to dispatch.
Yeah, there are ways to pick up extra.
I'll cut your grass.
Yeah, right.
There's extracurricular points. Yeah,
well, you'll get a seniority point, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to be able to dispatch. That's what I tell them. So
depends on how well they cut the lawn.
That's right.
The lawn, trim around the bushes.
Yeah. So seniority matters, and I think the system really provides a lot of skill and across the board. And so people get different jobs all the time, and that really helps with, in my opinion, the flow of the whole session. Nobody's having trouble with any one particular job because there's enough experience here to keep the session moving forward and provide everybody with almost equal opportunity to take some of those jobs that they might want to try or have a passion for.
Well, I would say it sounds like it would be hard to balance all that politics, but it sounds like you got a great system if you still have 90
absolutely.
people on that list willing to come and operate. Holy moly.
Yeah, and growing. So
yeah.
It's good that they want to come back too, because it's you hate to have people come over and get to the point where like this is I've had some people like that, and as easy as you try to make it for them, to them, they're just not cut out to operate. They're just I'd rather just go home and watch their train go around a circle. They don't. Some people come over and they run trains in circles, and once they come on op stage, it's like, wow, I didn't know I can do all this. And then all of a sudden that goes no more with that. They want to operate. So and then you get people to go the other way. I'm sure we've all had them. Every host has had somebody like that.
Yeah, it's all about them having a positive experience. And that's
Absolutely.
My goal, is to make sure everybody has a positive experience so that they want to come back. And it's all about how we're managing that, especially with newer operators and guests.
I want to get into how the operating session starts, but I want to cover before we leave this point. We talked about how many people are interested in operating, and you said you operate once a month. Has it ever been a temptation for you to run the layout more than once a month with that much demand to operate it?
There has, but it's a scheduling issue on my part. There's just a lot going on that I just haven't had the time to do that. I'm fortunate that I can do it once a month.
Yeah.
So there have been occasions we've had groups come out. I've got a group coming out in about 8 weeks, and we'll do a couple of sessions. And I'll turn it around, and so they'll come out one day and they'll go to another layout, and then they'll come out to my place again, give me a couple hours to turn the layout around so that we can operate again. But generally, that's the only time that I'll do more than one a month, is when groups come out. Every other year we do Rocky Up. It's an open, I don't want to call it an invitational, but it's an open event. People can register and come out and operate along the Colorado Front Range. We also do an invitational once a year for different groups around the country. And I also get a lot of requests from different groups around the country to come over just so that their group can operate. And so we try to accommodate everybody that we can.
So there is some bonus operating going on along with that. So yeah,
Right.
that's great, and great opportunities to be able to see your layout.
Yeah.
I can't believe I used to operate every week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Every week. I'm like, what was I think? I did that for like 7 years. Every week. 15, 16 guys every week.
Wow.
Well, you see how much more hair John's got left than you do, Don. I think that might be part of it.
thank God we had the Mark Herricks and the Joe and the other Joe and everybody would come in with layouts. So we got to break it all up, and Tony, and we had a round robin group going, and then we went back to that once a week thing, and that was great because you don't have any time for modeling between there. You can't do nothing.
Right.
It's crazy.
And sometimes I'll shut the layout down for example, I'm shut down for February because I'm working on a paper mill plant. And it's, I've got about 16, 17, 18 feet that I want to get done. And when you have a big project like that, and you try to operate in the middle, it's tough because, the layout's a mess and things are all over the place. And it's not very efficient to stop what you're doing and clean up and then operate and then put everything back out again to work on the layout. So I have shut down occasionally to try to get big projects done.
Well, on that same note, how soon did you start operating your layout in the construction phase?
As soon as we could. We had, I didn't call them beta sessions. I called them alpha sessions just to make sure things were working. We had connectivity and then we had beta sessions when we put the signal systems in, and we began operating immediately as quickly as we could. So it was really important to get feedback. And to this day, it's important to get feedback from people about how things are functioning, if they have ideas. In fact, one of the requirements I have to the operators, and I say this every session, the only thing I ask in return is that you let me know if you're having issues, write it down somewhere. Write it down anywhere in the basement and I'll find it. Write it down or send me an email with your thoughts, suggestions, problems. I need that feedback so that we have better reliability at the next session. Last thing we want to have happen is a problem or an issue continuing. So I'm a firm believer in nipping that in the bud right away. In fact, I probably spend more time post-session than I do pre-session, reading notes, correcting things, looking at suggestions, implementing those suggestions and ideas. Even if it's a coupler spring missing, I want to know about it. I tell them to write it down, let me know. So that's important. Feedback is critical.
It is. It's very critical.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's tell us about your jobs. How many road jobs you have, your through trains, and how you mix all that in with everybody.
Generally, out of the 20 positions, we have a dispatcher, and that's person's here. We don't do any remote dispatching. I know you're big on that.
Not yet.
Yeah, right. Don's going to come cut your lawn.
Yeah.
So.
A few times.
I think I'd have a mutiny.
Driveway
I'd have a mutiny here if I went remote dispatching. We'd have a strike out in the front yard. The operator
you can have two
strike.
dispatch. You can have a remote dispatch and then one on the property. So two guys you can split it in half.
Try that. Yeah.
Can you see why we have you on the show here tonight, John?
Yeah.
It's just to try to get Don a remote dispatching job. Yeah.
We do that on Mock's layout sometimes. I'll take one end and another guy will take the other if you've got a ton of guys over there, and it works good, And I always tell him, if you got a guy over there that wants to dispatch, I have no problem. Let's split it up. We got the means to do it. Let's just do it.
Yeah, I've thought about it hard, but I just don't want to take any work away from anybody. There are just people that love to dispatch, and I love to dispatch, and I don't even get to do it that often. So I have thought about it though. So anyway, so we have a dispatcher. Yeah, we have 2 people that work in the traffic center. I have active staging. I call them a traffic manager and assistant traffic manager, and they build trains. They take them out to the layout, put them on the, I have what are called crew change points. And the operators pick them up at the crew change point and then go over the layout. They bring them in, and the 2 people in the traffic center bring the trains back in. They manage the crew. They manage the schedule. They generate the GMRI operations, manifest and switch lists in real time. So those 2 people are very busy in the active staging traffic center. So those are two jobs. 2 people work back there. And again, there are people that just love doing that. Never have a problem filling a job back there. I thought I would. I thought, who'd want to work back there and not, run trains, but people love to work in the traffic center. So
that sounds like fun.
Yeah. And then the main yard job, we have 4 jobs that work in the yard. We have a yard master, doesn't turn a wheel. They're so busy coordinating with the traffic manager and the dispatcher and delegating work, and that's a critical job. So the yard master, we have 2 people that work in classification, one on the east end. The west end does classification, a little bit of classification, and they also work the logistics center, the intermodal center. They build a Z train and a stack train, and they bring them in, and so that's a job in the yard. And then we have a hostler. That person is busy all the time too. So those are the 4 yard jobs that we have in the main yard. We have a branch that's off in the back by itself. It's called the Crater Creek branch. And that operator just works all the industries on the branch. They come up, get cars, they bring them back down. And they're busy the entire session, just switching industries off the main line, doing their own thing. Very popular job. We have a coal shuttle that goes between the power plant, picks up empties at the power plant, takes them to the coal mine, loads them, brings them back. And during a 4-hour session, that'll get 2 runs over the entire layout. That's how long it takes to run over the layout between the power plant, which is at one end, and the coal mine, which is at the other end. And they go back and forth. That's just a popular job. And we have a small yard at an area called Kimber, which is a little bit of classification work, some local switching. You work with the trains that drop off and pick up cars. That's called Kimber. Another great job. They interchange with the branch line. So it's a good intermediate, smaller, medium, smaller type yard that also does a lot of industry switching. And then we have 2 locals that go out on the road the entire session. One that goes west out of the yard, it's called the Kimber Crawler, and takes the entire session to get out of the yard, switch everything westbound, come back. And then we have one that goes eastbound out of the yard. It's called the Decker's Dodger. They go up and they switch everything east of the main yard and come back on a separate subdivision. So,
are these actual names of these trains, or is this something you made up?
No, I've made them up. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
All
the
right.
Crawler and the Dodger, they're
Yeah.
out there fighting mainline traffic to do their work.
Okay.
So that's why we call them the Crawler and the Dodger.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And then the extras, the rest are extras. So we have about 6, 7 extra jobs, and they run through trains, through freights. They'll run Amtrak. I have several industries that have their own switchers, and they do intra-plant switching. So I have a cement plant, paper mill, a couple of other jobs that get called off the extra board to switch industries. And that can take anywhere from, 15 real minutes to an hour real time to switch that. So based on, their activity level. And so there's a lot of switching opportunity. I have a separate business park that's fed from staging that gets called off the extra board. That takes probably 2 real hours to switch. That was in addition to the layout. So that gets called off the extra board. A lot of good jobs off the extra board. It's not just running over the main line from point A to point B. So those are all the jobs.
It's a good example of how to have all kind of different types of trains that people will be comfortable with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because some people are very hesitant about switching, and they just love to run over the main line. Then
Right.
you get the exact opposite of guys that don't want to hear mainline trains, and all they want to do is switch. Or you got a guy that he just wants to work a yard all the time.
Exactly.
It's funny how that happens. Do you mix in your like your rail train and your little work trains and stuff in the sessions too?
Yeah. So those are the extras that run. So we might have a rail train. We might have a work extra. I have a couple different. I have a high rail. We do a high rail inspection that runs over the layout. We did that last session. There's a track geometry train that we run. There's actually a train that stops at all of the greasers, the flange lubricators, and fills them up. And they fill up propane tanks as well for the switch heaters. So there's that kind of stuff. There's a train that does that. There's a sweeper that goes out, picks up, all kinds of stuff. Typically railroad equipment, the plow or the fire train, bring it back to storage. So there's a lot of maintenance. Probably every session, there's at least one maintenance train or job like that running. And sometimes we'll take a track out of service, a section of the double track main or a siding, and I'll put equipment on there and we'll actually shut it down so the dispatcher can't use it. So
I love that.
We've even gone as far as Form A and Form Bs. We have Forms A and B, flags out, the whole work. So we try to really replicate what the prototype is doing as closely as we can. And I got a few guys that work for the BNSF that come over and operate. Yeah, they love to do that. One guy wants to be the foreman. So when there's a Form B, the crew's got to call him on the radio, and then he walks them through the Form B, the limits of the Form B. So, stuff like that happens all the time. So
that's good. And I love stuff like that. It's so cool.
So we run if it's snowing out during the day of the session, we run a plow train. It's a 2-person job. I've got the engineer, and then we have got the rotary operator. So that runs if it's snowing. If we have high fire danger in the summertime, we have a fire train that runs up and patrols and comes back down. We have manned helper service for some trains. So there's a lot of variables that are in there. It's not the same old thing every session. That's for sure.
Sounds like you got a great mix of jobs that seem like they would be kept all session. And then you got guys that are kind of changing jobs along the way too. So you got a mix of both of that.
Yeah.
When you do your helper trains, do you actually consist the helpers to the lead locomotives, or you have two guys run it independently?
So some of the trains have DPUs. They're programmed to work with the lead engine. So especially the big unit trains that need DPUs to come up the grade. So this is a multi-level layout. So we go from the lower level to the upper through a constant visible grade. And to get up that grade, some of the trains have DPUs that are programmed to work with the engines. And we also have manned helpers, so that whenever we have a train that needs manned helper, that's called off the extra board. So you'll get a crew call, Don, to report to Kimber to shove a train up the hill. So whoever's available in the crew lounge will get the call to run the helpers. So what's interesting about that job is that the crews are responsible themselves to figure out if they need helper service based on the horsepower and the tonnage. So they know what the horsepower is because they have an engine card attached to their manifest. And on the manifest, it tells how many tons there are in the train. So there's a rule based on horsepower and tonnage. If you're under that, you're going to have to call before you get to Kimber so that the crew's ready for helpers. If you don't need them, you just continue on. So the operator has to call a dispatcher who calls the traffic manager so they can call Don to report for helper service. So they got to pay attention to what's going on. And sometimes the operators will miss that. They'll go up without the helpers, but the manned helpers are just independent, and the operator takes them with a throttle and actually has to shove up the hill, has to shove the train up.
Okay, so you got two guys controlling what the lead crew controlling their power, and then the helper crew controlling their power with two different throttles.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, and it's up to the helper to look at the slack action to make sure he's actually shoving.
It's not for everybody.
Right. It's a tough job. It can be tough. Yeah.
It is.
So
it is.
But
it's fun, though.
Another one of those jobs people love. So
yeah.
Well, along with the rest of the layout, sounds like an amazing challenge, and kind of leads me to wonder, how long does it take for an operator to kind of get up to speed with most everything? Because there's a lot going on there. I mean, just dispatching alone, that layout must be, kind of an education. How long does it usually take for somebody to really get acquainted and pretty strong at operating your layout?
It really depends on how often they come and they participate in the session. So fortunately, my documentation is pretty clear. And on each manifest or switch list, there's a section on top with some instructions on it. So if they take the time to read, and there's a challenge, if they take the time to read and understand what they're doing,
I've already confessed to not reading all the instructions earlier in this podcast, so I'll have to see how well I get along.
So that, and also one of the things I talk about in a briefing, especially if we have somebody new, is that we're here to help. So they shouldn't hesitate to ask a question about what to do, and that's true for anybody. And that happens a lot. People are asking each other, "Hey, how do I do this, or how do I do that, or I haven't run this job in 6 months, or whatever." So it all kind of works out, but that really hasn't been an issue.
Well, that's got to be part of the challenge too. Like you mentioned, when you have a new person that comes in and then they see this layout that you have, it's got to be pretty intimidating to them.
Yeah.
You taking those steps to make them feel comfortable.
Yeah. That helps. And even seasoned operators that might take a new job. Last session, I had a new guy working in the traffic center, and he did a great job, but he said, "Hey, there's things I can do better next time." So as the owner or the host, I would prefer to have that person take that job again, 2 sessions in a row, because that's how you're really going to learn. If it's 6 months or 7 months till that person does it again, they might not, they might forget something, or it might not be as sharp. But if they take it the next month that they're here, they're probably going to remember it well. So those key jobs that people take for the first time, I like to have them step into that same role the second time, the second session, the next session. That's helpful too.
So what's your rules on being an actual dispatcher? Do you need to run every job on a layout before you can actually be a dispatcher? No. Now
there are people, if you want to dispatch, I'll have somebody work with you to help you understand it and get acquainted. They'll be in the dispatcher's office in a chair behind you. But there are some people that pick it up really well and run with it right away. They just need 5 or 10 minutes and they catch on really quick. And some people aren't meant for it. And those people, I think, know that they're having difficulty and they stress out about it and they don't want to do it again. So
they're standing in the back of the line when it comes to dishing out the dispatcher jobs.
Yeah. So they'll take another job, something they want to do, whether it's switching or a road job or what have you.
Well, we know how many people are going. You got a bunch of jobs. How long do these operating sessions last?
They're 4 hours. So we run a fast clock. We do have a fast clock system. So we run a day shift is 0600 to 1800. That's a 12-hour shift. And the night shift is 1800 to 0600. So those two shifts are 12 hours, 12 fast hours. And then we run a 3-to-1 clock. So it's 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So after the session, we do have an optional dinner and at a local restaurant. And we typically have about 12, 14, 15 people that show up for that. And that's a good time to talk, socialize, talk about the session. So it's beneficial to get together after the session.
Critique.
Well. Yeah, critique. Exactly. Yeah, I get a lot of feedback over dinner.
That's good.
If Don comes out and he mows your lawn and he pays for dinner, how many seniority points is he going to get?
I might be able to move right into the dispatcher's chair.
You might be able to, yeah. We'll have to work something out. I need a lot of I need a lot of snow shovel. Do you do that?
No, shovel. Yeah, my back. I gave up on the snow, John.
That's going to get you on the extra board, Don.
That's right.
I can get you enough seniority points for that
Grass
chair.
I can handle. Snow is, I don't know. I think I had enough of snow. I'm done with the snow. Anyway, but it's good. That's really interesting. It's, the difference between modeling class ones and doing what I do with a regional. I'd love to do some of the stuff you're doing, but my layout just isn't big enough.
Yeah.
Or would I even do that? Like helpers and stuff like that. I mean, the BNW doesn't use helpers,
Right.
Use 2 locomotives. Just whatever they got there, that's what they use. And
that's great.
They don't have any hills and stuff to go up and over, and so
that's great. That's great fun. I mean, all layouts are different. That's what's that's the beauty behind this hobby is there's such a variety. Makes it interesting. So
my challenge is my paper mill. That's the challenge for everybody that comes here. I've had guys that come here that can do that thing in an hour and 10 minutes, and I got guys on there that die on it and never get it done. Right. I've seen them get the engine on the wrong side of all the cars, and I still can't figure out how they've done that. It's just, but I tell them, look, you want to do it? I want you to do it.
Sure.
You do it the way you want to do it. You're over here all by yourself. You don't have to talk to anybody. You just figure it out on your own. You could take 10 minutes. You could take 3 hours. It doesn't bother me.
Right.
If you don't finish it, you don't finish it. But the point is you're getting into it and you're trying to figure it out because it is a puzzle. I did not make it easy. And I got one guy, he's like, bang, 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 and he's like, he's unbelievable. He's very efficient at switching, but he's probably really the only one, but I got a couple of jobs like that scare people. And it's like, how do you, there's an engine with 4 cars. How hard does that sound? Believe me, if you don't do it in the right order, it's very difficult, So I was forced to make that happen, to make the session last, up to 3 hours. Sometimes we don't even finish it after 3 hours. I got to come in the next day and put stuff away. It's been left out or whatnot because a lot of guys still work. And everybody's retired. They have to go to work the next day. And some of these guys got an hour ride home.
Right.
Well, kind of on that same note, John, do you find your operations are evolving? Do you find that you're making changes, even or adding new jobs as you learn new things?
Yes. Yeah. And the reason is, I view operations is very much like modeling a prototype freight car. We're looking at what the prototype does. We're taking lessons from the prototype. And when you have real railroaders part of your session, they're more than happy to jump in and help. And so, we're including the detail that the prototype does, the practices, the procedures, the policies. I try to incorporate as much of that into the session as I can. And it's really about the experience. It's not about finishing a job quickly and getting done and going on to the next train to get over the main line. I tell everybody it's about what I like to call quality throttle time. So take your time, read the instructions, take the time to do it, and enjoy the actual work. Don't worry about getting it done or not getting it done or getting it done quickly. It's really about the individual experience on that particular train or job that you're doing. When I think about that and we add is we add more prototypical things to the operation, it changes the entire session. And a lot of the railroaders will bring that on. It's, hey, your signal is in the wrong place here. I had that last year. I worked through an issue. A rail told me that, that signal placement wasn't correct. And another rail said, well, it is correct. Well, I work for the BNSF. Well, I worked here. And, they get into the argument. And I'm thinking, oh, great. So I refer to my
worth
buddy.
The price of admission right there just to watch those arguments. Yeah.
So things like that happen all the time. And we talk about, the Forum B I talked about, where one of my operators has volunteered to act as the foreman to talk trains to the limits of the Forum B. We haven't done that a lot because I'm not sure how well it's going to catch on, but things like that we're including in the operation, and it changes the entire session quite a bit. It can or not in some cases, but I'm not afraid to try some things either. One of the interesting things we're doing, or we have done, is a 3-person local job where you have a engineer, a conductor, and a brakeman, switch person.
Oh.
And I call it the 3-person Kimber crawler, and it's a role playing. So there are rules to the role playing. For example, you can't talk to each other unless your figures are close together. Everybody's issued a figure, right? The engineer has to stay in the cab. You have to take the time to simulate walking between the switch and the car. You can't set the couplers, all those types of things. And that's been very popular. We haven't done it for a while, but the guys keep asking me, let's do the 3-person Kimber crawler. You have to use hand signals. It's a lot of fun. It's really role playing like the prototype does. And for anybody that's interested, there's a description of that job on my webpage. It's called the 3-person Kimber crawler, and it's got the rules of the role. That's what I call it. So we're doing a lot of things to change it up and to try things. Some things don't work, and sometimes they do, but at least we're trying. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's got to be a blast to be able to experiment like that. And
yeah,
that's amazing.
Do you have the other thing? You ever have any of your guys that use the switching app on their phone while they're switching? Like you can set the handbrakes, release the handbrakes.
No,
I don't know if you know about that app. It's on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's had that yet. I know about it, but I haven't seen it. I don't think it's fairly new.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I've used it. I use it a lot myself, especially when I'm switching by myself. Because it just kind of simulates that length of time, rather than just getting off, throwing a switch. It just kind of breaks it down into some time and make it last a little longer. So I like it. I do.
Yeah,
like
I love that mentality. It's really about the journey, not the destination.
Right.
I don't want op sessions to end. I'm usually the last guy done anyway, mainly because I've screwed everything up and I have to fix it. Yeah, well, we already saw. So by this time it comes out.
I know in previous shows, Ray, you've talked about things that you can do to slow down the operation.
Yeah.
And we do all that here. I do as much as I can to slow things down. And again, put that operator in the moment, if you will, right? Yeah. In the layout, operating the train. That's the key.
Yeah.
So whatever I can do to, slow things down and get people engaged in the layout, I try to do.
And it's such an amazing, the experience that, the engagement, the day's troubles, the anything else, you can get yourself lost into it. It's such a therapeutic thing. There's a therapy to it. It really is, of being able to just think about nothing more than switching out an industry or, getting a train across a main line. You're not thinking about anything else. It's kind of why I don't like working with my phone. Like I love a throttle because, if it's a phone that everything's shut off, but I don't want to get a text message. I don't want to see a Facebook Messenger. I want to just lose myself for that period of time and just be able to run trains. And it sounds like that's an environment you're really fostering, John.
Yeah. And that's part of the layout design as well. The layout was designed for that very thing. So when you're operating, you're by yourself quite a bit. You're not seeing the operators. You're not hearing the other operators. You're by yourself. You're in the moment, you're in the layout. You don't know what's coming around the corner because you can't see it. There's barriers, walls. That was a critical aspect of the layout design for operations that I talk about in some of my clinics. But so part of that experience is about the design of the layout too.
Yeah, you've done a great job. It's a beautiful layout. Do you use proto throttles at all? You got guys using proto throttles there?
Yeah, when we do a 3-person Kimber crawler, the engineer, his only job is to run the proto throttle.
All right.
and he's in the cab. So yeah.
Well, now Don's found out there's some proto throttles involved and may take him out of the dispatcher chair and over to the proto throttle. So
I love that thing.
Yeah.
I love that thing. It's
the only thing of proto throttles missing is the sticker on the back that says that they're highly addictive. There should be a Surgeon General's warning on the back, but they're, it's an amazing tool. But John, amazing layout you've got and the operations. I'm glad you were able to come on with Don and I and share all of that. We're going to share a bunch of links related to John's layout, including that tour I mentioned before. TSG Multimedia came out and did an awesome job with that. So we'll share that link and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com/145. John, thank you again for coming on Around the Layout and sharing your ops story with us.
Absolutely, John. I appreciate you for being here, John. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love to spend time with you guys, and been great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.